And I think most of you know that there is something that is moving us towards 2012 other than just the calendar. Right? We can all feel something's happening. There is an acceleration. It feels like the days are getting shorter. It feels like situations are getting heavier. What's going on? We can feel that. Even if we didn't have all of the prophecies that are saying and pointing towards this period of time, we can feel that there's something going on. So we're going to speak very briefly about some of those tonight. But I want just a very quick show of hands with 2012. Who has heard all the horror stories? Seen everything in our media around us at the moment is geared to keep us afraid of 2012. Who's heard anything good about 2012? Oh, that is a relief, right? Because usually it's like I'm doing a spoiler alert. Right? And I say, look, the world's not going to end in 2012. Everybody looks quite disappointed. Right? But the truth is, it is going to go on. But there is stuff happening, and I have been talking about 2012 since before September 11. Right, about 5 years before September 11, and this is when this acceleration started. We started speaking about the disaster consciousness that was coming on the planet at that point in time, and how if it didn't change, buildings would be falling down in New York. So that's happened, so we don't have to worry about that now. But one of the things, and there's a lot of you here that are actively professional psychics, that are actively practicing psychics, and what a lot of the general community doesn't understand is what September 11 actually signified for everybody. And for us that do this work, what it signified was that the public are starting to get the message. You know, I don't know about you guys, but I've been doing this here on the Gold Coast and all around the world for about 35 years. I might not be as young as I look, but I'm going to tell you how old I am. I'm 50. Get it out of the way quickly. Yeah, so I've been doing this for a very long time. And I got to the stage about 7 years before I did the TV show where and I think we've all felt like it, I'm going to hang them up. If they haven't got the message by now, I'm not doing any more readings. This is not what it's about. I'm getting them dependent upon me instead of trying to get them out there doing it for themselves. So I packed it all up, and I used to have a centre out in Talabudra Valley here called Shambhala Awareness Centre. A few of you may have come out there. It was 168 acres of rainforest, and it was just lovely. And I went, if anybody wants anything, they can try and find me. I used to do my workshops and things out there, but apart from the personal stuff and the readings, I didn't do it. Until Simon came and approached me, Simon Turble came and approached me about the TV show. And he said, look, I know that you can show people, you can actually demonstrate what you can do, and we need that on TV. We need somebody who can show people what can be done. And I said, oh, that's good, Simon. No. And he just kept asking me until eventually I went, okay, but I want to be left alone. Guess what? The being left alone thing didn't happen. And it just doesn't happen when you're doing this work. Because part of being a psychic is getting that push to get out there because you're of service to the community, right? So you do, when you think you're not going to do it anymore and you're going to have a life for yourself, they pull you back in. It's worse than the mafia. You get out, then they pull you back in again. So, and the reason is because of this acceleration towards 2012, right? And what is going to happen in 2012, right? I love that little cartoon. Have you seen that one before? Yeah. I only had enough room to go up to 2012. Well, that's going to freak a lot of people out someday. Alright. So 2012 is a significant event. It's not just about running out of room on the calendar. Oh, and by the way, all calendars are circles, not just the Mayan calendar. Has anybody got Thomas Immer's moon calendar in their house? Thomas from out Talabudra Valley? Yeah. Yeah, and that shows that, you know, when it gets around to December 31st each year, the world doesn't end because that's the end of the cycle. It just goes back to January 1. And the same with the Mayan calendar. It is wheels within wheels, and we'll speak more about that. But it shows time cycles within time cycles that are all lining up at this 2012 time, right? At the winter solstice in the northern hemisphere and the summer solstice in the southern hemisphere. So when people get all hung up on the fact that it's going to be December 21st, and oh my God, the scientists are having a field day with that at the moment, right? It's not really any particular number of a day, because when it is the 21st on that side of the timeline, right, over here it's the 23rd, right? So it's actually 0 degrees Capricorn, which is the easiest way to explain it to people. We've got some astrologers here. So it's 0 degrees Capricorn, right when the solstice starts, right? And the scientists at the moment are all jumping up and down saying, well, there's no alignment going to happen on the 21st. They're right. Right? It happens about 24 hours later than the 21st, depending upon where you are at in the world. So when people say the world's going to end on the 21st, you go, yeah, okay. Whereabouts are you living at that point in time, right? Because when it's the 21st, there, you know, you've only got to travel an hour, about 4 hours to get to the next hour time zone. Right? So this is the Mayan calendar that everybody's very worried about. They've actually found several different forms of this now. It's not just the one calendar that they have. Right. And these are the cycles that are going around. As you can see within here, we've got our 8 basic cycles, and most of our calendars are based on the 2 solstices, the 2 equinoxes, and the cross quarters in between. Right? But then you have your other cycles around there. And it is actually pointing to the end of the cycle and the start of the next era. This whole Mayan calendar is about a 24,000 year period of human history. It's a big cycle, right? But we know that most of our calendars run on different cycles. Our lunar cycle, there are a lot of countries in the world that run on lunar cycles, are only 28-day cycles. So we've got a little cog that turns within the bigger cog of the 365 days of the year, and then we've got our yearly cycles, our flood cycles, our drought cycles, you know. And these are something that you don't have to be psychic to know about. Everybody has asked me why. Right? I predicted the floods, you know, why I was able to say this is going to be the coldest and wettest year on record. Well, yes, I had that gut feeling, but yes, I also am a student of Indigenous cycles, right? And most of our Indigenous cultures are much better timekeepers than what we are, right? Because our Gregorian calendar was actually invented by the Catholic Church, and it's arbitrary. They just put an arbitrary number of days and months in there, where the lunar calendars are actually much, much more accurate. See, and when we're dealing with these cycles of time, this is our Irish spirals, the triple spiral. Right? When you see the triple spiral, you've got to think of this, right? Of our planets in our solar system spiraling through space, right? And that's what our calendars represent. Right? So you can see now why this has to be a PowerPoint presentation. I have given this talk a few times just by drawing on a whiteboard, but you lose so much. When you see those sort of comparisons together, you get it straight away. But this is also a calendar, right? And we see these depictions of calendars everywhere we go. Right? And it's speaking of solar time, lunar time, and greater cycles of time. And this journey that our solar system takes through our galaxy takes 24,000 years for it to come back to 0, right? So when your clock goes around, it goes around 12 hours and it comes back to midnight, we don't go, oh my God, the world's going to end because the hands on the clock are back to midnight. But no, it's just a signal that we've gone through a period of time that's about to start again. And this spiraling of our solar system is what 2012 is about, galactic 0. Our galaxy, right, and our solar system is pointing up, is lining up with galactic 0. Right? So it's like the big hands on the biggest clock that we know are pointing back to midnight again. It is reflected in a lot of different cultures, not just the Mayan. The I Ching actually points towards 2012. We won't go right into the mathematical formulas of that, but suffice to say there is quite a deep mathematical formula in the I Ching that ends up in 2012 as well. The Hopi Indians, they also speak about 2012 in quite some depth, right? And they've been waiting for their Pahana, have I said that correctly, Bobby? Pahana? Yeah, which is the big 3, right? The big 3 can be interpreted many different ways. They've been waiting for 3 people to appear, but also for 3 things to happen and for 3 cycles to coincide. And the 3 cycles coincide at 2012. The Hindus also have cycles of time. Now this is one that gets written up incorrectly. I have my birthday's on this day when this is all supposed to happen, right? And that makes me 0 degrees Capricorn. Just about everything in my chart is in Capricorn. And any of the astrologers here will know what that means. Yeah, she's anally retentive. Yes, that's right. Which means everything's got to be right. And when you see it written up in magazines that we're in the Kali Yuga, and that Kali is the goddess of death and destruction, oh, that's so wrong. They obviously don't know Hindu mythology at all. Right? One, Kali is not the goddess of death and destruction, and two, we're in the Kali Yuga, not the Kali Yuga. The Kali Yuga is a male god in Hindu tradition of gambling, dice and things going chaotic. Right? It is the Kali Yuga, not the Kali Yuga. It's got nothing to do with a woman at all, so don't blame the girls, guys. Right? So, but at the end of this Kali Yuga, right, which again is a very long cycle of time, starts our next Yuga, our Golden Yuga. Right? So, again, and oh my God, you hear so many stories on the internet that are just not true. And they're going, these Egyptian predictions. There aren't any Egyptian predictions about 2012. What there is, however, is the Sphinx, who does seem to be pointing towards where the last 24,000 year period of history finished. Right? It seems to be a marker of where that last cycle finished. Right? And we are understanding now that pyramids and a lot of Egyptian architecture has been around a lot longer than what our current history wants to believe. Right? So the fact that the Sphinx has been there for 24,000 years, to most Egyptians is just common knowledge. Right? But it's only the British Archaeological Society that says, oh no, it's only been there for 3,000 years. We can see it's much older than that. Right. The Aztec calendar is slightly different to the Mayan calendar, and it says things are really going to start accelerating from December, right? And particularly at the 11th month, at the 11th hour, in December on the 11th day at the 11th hour. Right. So the Aztec calendar is just slightly different to what the Mayan calendar is. And the Incas as well, they also agree that this is the start of a new age as well. Australian Indigenous people, it's so hard to know what's politically correct to call our Indigenous people in Australia now. But our first people attribute the passivity of their nation to invasion to the fact that they knew that it was only going to last about 200 years before the next cycle started. Right. So they don't have any specific prophecies, but they are masters of the art of time. When you start, I have had the privilege of having 2 Gadaicha in Australia teach me some stuff. And they only taught me some stuff because they didn't like what I was teaching to other people. I had a Tibetan teacher, and she was in Australia here, not over in Tibet, but she wasn't Buddhist. And because Tibet is on the rooftop of the world, most of their magic, most of their traditions are based on the manipulation of time. So are the Australian Aborigines. And then they came over and they went, look, we know you know how to do this, but you don't teach that to everybody because not everybody's worthy. Right? So you've got to make sure it's worthy. And if you teach it to somebody who's unworthy again, we'll stop you. And I was like, oh, okay, all right, got the message, I've been told. Right, so what I'm telling you though is I'm not revealing any great secrets, because this is something that everybody should know about this cycle of time and what's happening. But there are people that want to keep us in the dark and keep us in the mushroom syndrome. Alright, including our scientists, so trying to tell us that this planetary alignment is not happening. Right? The planetary alignment is happening. Right? Any astronomer and astrologer in the audience today will tell you that we've got a lineup coming. Yeah, we do get minor lineups, but this is the great alignment. Right, it is going to happen. It won't be as pretty and perfect in a row like that. And some of the planets will actually be on the other side of the sun. But the fact is, it's making a straight line that points to this galactic zero. And the interesting thing is about all of these planets is you have a south pole and a north pole in there on all of the planets, right? And we know why they have a south pole and a north pole, because they are big magnets. Right? Each planet is a great big magnet. I don't know if you guys played with magnets like I did when I was a child, but if you get a whole lot of magnets and you put them together, they all stick together and they make a big magnet. Right? It's a lot stronger than any of the magnets by themselves. Right? Now the only one that doesn't go along with being a magnet as we know it is the sun. Right? The sun has north and south poles, but it has a lot of them and not at the top and bottom. It has north and south poles all over the surface. So when you get all the planets lining up and pulling together, the north and south poles of the sun start to line up into one direction. When that happens, right, we get a pulling on the planet. Right? So, and we actually have Islamic prophecies about 2012 that say that the Earth is going to be egg-shaped. And they're right. I mean, the Earth is not perfectly spherical anyway, but certainly when we're getting the other planets pulling it like a magnet, right, it's going to go egg-shaped, right? Not quite as bad as an emu egg, but we get the general idea. And when you get a planet pulling, right, what happens? We get the tectonic plates rubbing on each other, right, and pulling and pushing against each other. And when we get tectonic plates rubbing and pulling on each other, we get earthquakes, tsunamis and fun things like that. This is science. Our scientists knew that 2011 would be the time of the greatest movement of the Earth's surface for the last several thousand years, if they don't believe it was for the last 24,000 years. So as we have the planet moving and changing shape like that, and the planets actually, tectonic plates pulling on each other, they knew that there was going to be movement along those plates, and that anybody living along those plates would be suffering from earthquakes. So, and I'm going to pose this question to you, and we'll answer it sort of at the end of this discussion. Why would our scientists, one, who knew this was going to happen, not tell anybody to get away from the fault lines, because there's going to be earthquakes? But secondly, why would they place a nuclear reactor in a highly populated centre, right, of a food production area, right, that also has traditionally suffered from tsunamis, right, for the last several thousand years, in a nation that's supposed to be the most intelligent nation on the planet? Why would they do something so stupid when they knew this was going to happen? My dad, very practical Englishman, and he says two things. When you see something that's really, really stupid beyond explanation, you've got to look at two things. One, if it's so stupid it defies explanation, it's deliberate. And secondly, you have a look to see where the money trail leads. Right? And there is both of those involved as we come to 2012. And we'll explain a little bit more about that later. Now, as our planets all pull on the sun, what the sun does, as we said before, the sun lines up, right? And all of its magnetic poles start going in the same direction. And we start getting these solar flares, right? Now, the solar flares don't mean like that movie by Nicolas Cage that we're all going to turn into toasty crisps. It doesn't happen like that. What it does mean, right, because the sun is a big nuclear reactor. We all know it's very, very warm, but the solar flares, right, they do try and scare us because that's the approximate size of the Earth to a solar flare, but that's nowhere near us, right? There are 3 planets in between. It's a long way. So it doesn't actually increase the temperature, right? Can I just have a quick show of hands? How many people here at their game actually believe that we're heading into a global warming cycle? When we had the coldest winter night on record in 27 years last night. All right. So we're not. When these solar flares happen, it actually makes the planet cooler, right? Because we had some lovely people in Queensland we can be very proud of called Lennox Walker and Inigo Jones. Have you ever heard of them? Yeah. Yeah, they used to do the long-range weather forecasting based on sun flares, solar flares and sunspot activity, right? And they got awards for meteorology all around the world because they were able to point this out to the meteorological community, right? And they are very, very accurate with their predictions. So they knew this year was going to be the peak year for sunspots and solar flares, which means lots of rain, so the water's going to be there, right? And whose feet are going wet? I don't mind that. Right. And the other thing that's going to happen is because of all this rain, the temperatures get cooler. Right? We get more cloud cover, more rain, and it's freaking freezing. Right? That's what happens when you get solar flares. It doesn't get hot, it gets cold. Right? Because the solar flares don't actually put out any more heat, even though it's leaping out. You know, when you've got a fire and the flame leaps up on the fire, does that suddenly make everything around that fire warmer? No, you've just got a flame leaping up. Right? But what this flare is actually made of is electrons. Right? And this wouldn't work if it didn't have a flow of electrons running through it. Right? So what is happening is huge electrical interference with everything. Right? And I gave this talk about 18 months ago, and I was giving it at the My Body Spirit in Sydney, and I do talks, readings after the talks, and I had two ladies come up and see me, and they went, "Oh, we'd like to book a reading for you, with you," and I went, "Yeah, sure, not a problem," and they got booked in. They booked an hour with me at the festival, which we try to discourage, because we try and let as many people see me as possible. And it turns out they were two heads of Optus, wanted to know about these solar flares. And I said, "Well, it's science." And I explained to them what was going to happen. They said, "Yeah, well, we heard that in your talk. We're very interested. We knew what was going to happen. We just want to know the magnitude of it." Because the last really big solar flare activity that they had was in 1879. And in 1879, this stream of electrons coming from the sun in a big storm melted all the then telegraph cables from the inside out around the planet. Right? So what they've been trying to do is put insulation in place to try and prevent that. So Optus actually had been putting insulation in place with their network services, but Telstra didn't. And we all know what happened to Telstra at the start of the year. The solar flare activity started, and their satellite dropped out of the sky. And because these two ladies were ready and they had approved all the insulation going into place into the Optus satellites, they were able to let Telstra piggyback their network on their satellites, because Optus is a very, very big company compared to Telstra. But in Australia, Telstra's got the stranglehold. So Optus made a fortune. I should have charged those ladies more for that reading. Right. But so what we're going to have happen with all of this electronic activity going on, we've had just a week ago, we had a solar flare storm go through. Right? And since then, who's had trouble with their phones? Who's had trouble with their internet? Whose internet's just going slow, we don't know why. Right? So this is all this stuff happening. We've been telling people about this for years, so this is happening now. Yeah. Yeah. And it's people's being unprepared for it that is causing the problems. Right? Simply they weren't told about it, or they didn't want to know about it. But the ones who are prepared are going to benefit. Right? And the same applies for you guys. So we know that there's going to be earthquakes and tsunamis in 2011. So people who knew that stayed away from areas that had seismic activity as a tradition. And they laughed at me when I was telling them there was going to be earthquakes in Melbourne. We were in Adelaide and we were on the morning show, was the sunrise. And I said, "Oh, what's going to happen?" I said, "Well, it's going to be earthquakes in Adelaide and Melbourne." And they went, "You're nuts." And I went, "You'll see." So we've had, since then, the earthquakes in Adelaide and Melbourne. Because you just draw a line and you can see where the seismic activity is going to be. 2013 is a good idea if you've got a holiday, don't go anywhere where there's a fault line. Stay away from fault lines. Right? Because we know that the planet's got to go back, start to go back into shape again, so there'll be movement of the plates again. We know that these solar flares are happening. We know that there's going to be electrical interference. So, you know, make sure that if there's a solar flare coming, you switch your computer off, you pull your TV out of the wall, otherwise you'll blow your big screen TV and melt your modem in you. It's possible that the modems can get melted in the computers. So prepare for it so it doesn't cost you in the long run. The other thing that they knew that was going to happen, and this really touches all of us in Queensland, is they knew that there were going to be floods. We told them that there were going to be floods. Right? But apart from us telling them, the scientists knew. Right? So, you know, they're pushing through all these new laws that they've got about how they're going to raise money off our water system. And I think most of us are aware here that while the One Dam was really, really low in Brisbane, that because our dam on the Gold Coast here is really full, they were putting the water into trucks and trucking it up to Brisbane and selling our council water to Brisbane, and our council was making a fortune out of that. It was costing Brisbane and Toowoomba a fortune because they were buying water off us. And 20 years ago, my dad had to pay extra rates so that the Hinds Dam could be expanded so that his children and his grandchildren wouldn't have to pay so much for their water rates. It doesn't quite work that way, does it? But the sad thing is, we had the councils in Brisbane and Toowoomba. The rain started. Thank goodness, they knew the rains were going to start, so let's let the dam fill up. Now, a dam is not full when it's halfway full. Right? A dam is not full when it's full to the top, sorry, it's full when it's halfway full. They don't ever let a dam go to the top because it's too much stress on the wall. They do. So when the dams actually reached full at that halfway mark, they went, well, we don't want to be buying water again. We'll let it go a little higher. And we'll let it go a little higher. But because of the politics of greed allowing that to happen, of course, when our tropical rain cells, which we have every summer, we always have them, when they go through, what happened to the water in the dams? Of course, they filled up way above what was safe, and they had to pull the plug, literally. So this inland tsunami that we had here was totally generated through human greed. It wasn't a natural disaster. That's why the insurance companies arced up. Because it wasn't a natural disaster. It was a man-made disaster. It wasn't an act of God. It was an act of greed. Right? And they knew it was going to happen. They knew the dams were going to fill up. Right? But they didn't act accordingly. Right? And the same thing with us. Right? So we know these things are going to happen. Right? We know it's going to stay wet for a while. Right? But moist times when we have a lot of rain, is if you have a look at our economic cycles on the planet, generally have been the times when we've had the most prosperous cycles on our planet. Right. Which brings me to the next point. Right? Why are we having the economic rights? And we have been predicting the economic rights. Right? It's the politics of greed. Right? The same thing that happened in Japan, right, was politics of greed, and there's another agenda there as well, which we'll speak about. They started these economic rights. So that's the third thing you've got to watch out for 2012. As this system that we're living in starts to break down, we're going to have economic rights. So you have a look at nations that are having economic trouble, and you stay away from them. Now, we just got back from Holland about a month ago. And it's really interesting going overseas because we get next to no news in Australia. Nearly all of our real news is filtered out. Right? Because the economic riots are happening in Europe and they're happening in the United States. We're just not being told about it. In fact, we've had 2 economic riots here in Australia, and who's heard about them? This year. Right? Good thing about an economic riot, or any riot, is that it is a very localised animal. So if you feel or hear about one happening near you, you get out of the way. When the one was happening in London, where they were going up the street, I had one of my clients ring me up from Notting Hill. And he was going, oh my God, I can hear them coming up the street. And I said, well, get in your car and drive away. But they'll smash the windows. let them smash the windows and take the telly, get in your car and drive away, right? And that's what you've got to do. When you're in a situation like that, know where there's going to be trouble. And this is where the psychic ability does come in, because you can feel when there's trouble, right? You can also feel when there's going to be an earthquake, right? Because psychics and generally sensitive people, you don't even have to be very psychic to feel it, get what they call ultra-low frequency symptoms, right? And that means you start to get nausea, feeling vomity, diarrhea, right? And when you get a whole lot of people getting that in one area and there's no flu, you've got to have a look at what this ultra-low frequency is about. If you want to know what the ultra-low frequency feels like, go and see a horror movie. Now these days, what they're doing with the horror movies, and it started with Aliens, is they put the ultra-low frequency in to give you that sick feeling in the pit of your stomach to add to the effect of the film. All right? And that's why after you come home from the horror movies, you can literally be sick. Sick to your stomach, right? Because they're designing them that way now. Right. So with these economic rights, I just pulled these off the internet. These are ones that have happened very recently, so I just pulled these off the internet today. So you tell me if you've seen any of these anywhere, and you can tell me where these have happened. Do you know where that one happened? New York, that's right. This one? Big one? No, London. That's the middle of London. This one? No, actually, that was LA. That's LA. This one? Oh, big one? No, I showed Ken and he said Greece and Syria. That's France. Because they actually put barbed wire down the middle and cordoned off the Islamic area from the rest of the community. That was like a little concentration camp. And this one? That's LA again. These have all happened within the last 6 months. And how many of us are aware of it? Our media is being so controlled in Australia. We've had 2 economic riots here in Australia. We've had one in Canberra and one in Sydney. Right? But they've been very quiet. In that the alternative media, this is why Facebook and Twitter is great, because people are putting them up on Facebook and Twitter and letting people know. But the mainstream media has been ordered to not tell anybody. This is not happening. Right? La 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 la. My son used to work for a camera company in Sydney, right? And they were having, the camera shops were actually being held up. And so my son said, what's our theft policy? If somebody comes in, what are we supposed to do? They said, stick your fingers in your ear and go la 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 la. And that's what our media is telling us to do, even though we're moving towards these situations that we can prevent, right? That we can actually take action so it won't be bad for us, right? They want us kept ignorant and afraid, because if we are ignorant and afraid, then we can be controlled. Totally empowered people who are aware of their psychic abilities, who know what's going on around them, cannot be controlled. And oh my God, the powers that be don't want people that can't be controlled. Right? You've got to be good little consumers and do what you're told. Right? And Australia, I have to tell you, is so controlled. The people, our new God in Australia is TV. Okay, you see it on TV, it's real. You don't see it on TV, it didn't happen. And that's what's happening with this. You haven't seen it on TV, so it didn't happen. But there it is. Right? America's in big strife with its economic situation. It's going down. The economic centres of the world always move eastward across the globe. Before it was London, then it was New York. From New York it's got to go across the ocean and it's going to China. We all can see China is going to be the new economic power. That doesn't make them a bad guy. It just means that they're going to be the new New York. Hong Kong's going to be the new New York. Right, but this is what's going to happen in the United States and Greece and Syria, and it's going to happen more in London, right? And it will happen here in Australia too, right? Because they are going to have to pull a lot of that social services, a lot of that social support, right? There is going to be big upheaval. Our governments are going bankrupt. Why are they going bankrupt? Because they are doing it to them. It's not the governments themselves. Our governments are just the finger puppets. They're just doing what they're told. Right, so who's the they? Who are they? We always say, it's them. And we've always got someone to blame. It's either the kids, the husband, the government, Julie Gillard. So, but who really is it? Right. There are four conglomerates that control the world, that own the majority of the businesses and try and tell world governments what to do. And these are the big four: the drug conglomerates, the armament conglomerates. You know what a conglomerate is? Yeah, cool. All right. The Catholic Church, that one usually gets me to strife. Right, the Catholic Church isn't as big as she used to be, but she's still the largest landholder in the world, bar none. Right? Right? And the World Bank. The World Bank is certainly the most insidious of all four of them. Right? And you'll see every time we get a new Prime Minister here in Australia, 2 weeks later, they get a visit from the representative of the World Bank and all of their policies change. Right? Because the World Bank comes in and goes, no, you're not doing that, you're doing what we tell you to do. Right? And this is what they want. They want us afraid, they want us ignorant, and they want us controllable. So if we're not ignorant, if we know what's going on, and then the only way they've got to try and control us is to make us afraid. And the way that they can make people afraid is by things like what happened at Fukushima in Japan. A completely stupid situation that should not have happened, right? And oh my God, if that can happen in Japan, it could happen anywhere, right? And it was really crazy. Well, we were seeing some of the movies that they were, the film footage that they were showing on TV about Fukushima, and the Japanese guys were doing the same thing in that they do in the Godzilla movies. Here comes a tsunami. I'm not moving. They had 24 hours notice that there was a tsunami coming. Did they close down the reactor? Did they get out of the way? No, they went to the bridge and took photos. Yeah, not very many survivors, but we have 10,000 photos of the accident. It's terrible, And for very intelligent people, it's really sad. Right? If something big is coming towards you, get out of the way. Right? Move out of the way. They used to, in Japan, ring a bell when they knew the tsunamis were coming and everybody would climb up the mountains and get out of the way. But they've forgotten their traditional methods of dealing with these things. And now they deal with it like a Godzilla movie. Right? But we're doing it here too. We're far more interested in what's going to be happening in Big Brother than where the next economic right's going to hit. Right? Yeah, who won The Voice? We all know that. Ken does. But while The Voice was happening, we were distracted from the economic rights. So we didn't know where not to go or where to get out of the way of. So if you add to the economic rights the fact that the solar flares could come through in a really big way towards the end of the year, and if they knock out our electrical systems, that means our electronic funds and transfer will go down, right? Which will add to an economic right. So that means be prepared, right? If everything goes down, how are you going to survive for a couple of weeks? You don't want to be down there smashing the windows at Woolies trying to get food like everybody else, right? So think about it now, right? We've still got 5 months, right, before we get up to the really bad times of the solar flares and all those sorts of things. So make sure you've got 2 weeks worth of food in your cupboard, right? Pass some up. Make sure you've got some fresh water around the house, right? Make sure that if you keep petrol in the car, if you hear there's a riot coming, that you don't have to go, oh my God, I've left it really low, I don't think I've got enough petrol to get out of the way. Right, put some petrol in your car, make sure you've got the ability. Freedom is the ability to move, right? And freedom is also the ability to say no, right? Right? We want everybody to stay here, even though there's been a nuclear reactor accident. I don't think so. I would have been the first one rounding everybody up, going, let's get out of here. Not moving them back into the, oh, it's fine now. No, I don't think so. Right? So be prepared for things. Right? If you're in a place where there is seismic activity, get out of the way. Gold Coast is pretty safe. Right? But we were doing work up in Cairns. Right? Oh, and the other thing you probably want to avoid is Cairns around that time of the solar eclipse, the big solar eclipse that's going to happen up there, because solar eclipses traditionally have been bad luck. Last big solar eclipse that we had that was visible here in Australia was over Canberra, and they've got me in the paper saying, well, it's going to be some sort of national disaster. I said within 7 days of the eclipse, and that's when we had the big fires go through and burn everything out. Right, so you want to stay away, right, from the Cairns area during that solar eclipse time towards the end of the year. So when you become aware of these things, you can stay away from trouble. You get the gut feeling. We went through Cardwell as we're going up there. I said to Ken, they've got the island, but you know, you go through Cardwell and you can actually sit, you know, and have a picnic right on the Broadwater and look out over the ocean. It's a beautiful spot. I said, but they've got that island there for protection, but I don't think they're going to be safe. And sure enough, within a few months, they had the cyclones come through and completely wipe them out. The Gold Coast is actually very safe because we've actually got very shallow water that slopes a long way out. So there's no way, you know, if you know basic physics, there's no way we can actually be subject to a tsunami here. And it's actually been a very long time since we've had a cyclone come up South Broadwater. But 2013, we are going to have plenty of cyclones again because we're going to have that going back the other way. Right, so just around cyclone time, stay away from cyclone areas. Right? Right. So you know, as long as you're prepared, you're going to be fine. But you can imagine the panic that's going to go out there amongst everybody else. Right? Right? When there's panic, when there's an economic downturn, when things are going wrong, who's the first people that the general public turn to? Psychics. Yeah? Psychics or police officers. We're gone. We're going to be so busy. Right? They always want things fixed. They want to know that what's going to happen. Right? Oh, I've got myself into this problem, what do I do now? Right? They want to know. Right? And that's why you have to have your abilities. And it's not hard to develop your psychic abilities. That's 7 psychic secrets we go through. Seeing auras, moving energy, psychometry, remote viewing, healing and absent healing. And you can learn them all, right, very, very quickly. Like within one evening you can learn a skill. Right? It will take practice for you to become better and better at that skill. But once you've got the basic, you know, do this, do that, and get this result, it's very easy to do. Right? So it is up to you. It's up to you to, 1, be aware of what's going on. 2, don't trust the media because the media is controlled by these guys. Right? That's why we've set up a publishing company. That's why we bring out our own magazines. Right? Because we want there to be media that is not controlled by the big 4. Right? Alternative publishing, especially these little guys that are doing it on the internet, oh my God, they're going to be the saviour of us all. It's fantastic. And the other thing is, if somebody tells you to do something that you know in your gut feeling is wrong, you've got to have the ability to say no. You don't have to go, oh, well, it's the only system we've got. Well, if it's the only system we've got and it's broken, what's the logical thing to do? Fix it. The legal system here in Australia is so crazy. You know, every child, as they go through primary school, should be taught the laws so that they can defend themselves in court if they have to. And our legal system in Australia is so complicated. It shouldn't be like that. You know, they're bringing in laws that none of us agrees to. We've got a Prime Minister that we didn't vote in, with policies that she said she was never going to bring in, that has caused radical unemployment, and everybody's going, oh, it's the only system we've got. No. Everybody should be going, no, out. Get out of the pool. Right? We didn't vote for you. Right? You're not doing what we want you to do. You're gone. Right? Vote of no confidence, they call it. And it's happened before in Australia. But at the moment, We're just being so passive, more passive than any other nation on the planet about it. Right? Doesn't mean that we have to riot in the streets, but we certainly have to put our sweet little foots down and say no. Right? So, if somebody comes along and they want to do something that's going to put you or your family in danger, what are you going to do? You're going to say, no. Oh, that's pretty good. I think you can do better. Right? And if there is a disaster moving towards you, right, and somebody says, no, you're not allowed to get out of the way, you've got to stay there, you're going to say, no. It's better, that's good. You should never keep you wound up a bit, that's really good. Right? Right? And if somebody says to you, you can help other people and you've got to develop your psychic abilities to do it, you're going to say, yes. Gee, they're all awake too, it's good. Right? Because there is a storm coming. We know that there's a storm coming. But it's not the end of the world. It's not a disaster. It's just a storm. And guess what? Storms pass. And after the storm comes the rainbow. Right? The promise, the new future, the pot of gold. Right? And it's there for all of us. Right? On the other side of this is going to be a different situation. Right? If there is enough of us to help the people who aren't awake and aware through it. Right? So, the truth is, there's not going to be an end of the world in 2012. It's much more scary than that. We've got responsibilities. But that's the truth about 2012. Thank you very much.